Today's lesson has to do with this verse. I want you to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Every one of you has faced fraud. And it's been doubly dangerous during this time of the pandemic because you've been locked up and you're near the phone. And this is phone fraud. Some of the fraud comes in the mailbox. This morning, you're going to hear some of your pals in our class that have experienced fraud. And I want you to sit back and listen to what they say because they are very, very brave. They didn't have to come and tell me this because often when you've been scammed, you don't want to tell anybody because you're embarrassed. These people almost came that close to being scammed. I don't want you hitting a moose. I'm giving you this morning an amber light, and I'm telling you, be aware that there's something on the road that you're going to run into, and it's called fraud. My first speaker is James Sardichuk. James is going to tell you the story that happened in the home of his mom and dad and how close they came to something that would have been very, very embarrassing and expensive. James?
Oh, of course. When Ron asked me to recount a telephone scam known as the grandparent scam, my first question to him was, is that scam still around? Sure enough, on the 6 o'clock news that very night, it was one of the main features. My parents were caught up in this scam. It was almost 8 years ago. The good news, I'll tell you the end of the story first, is they didn't get scammed. Why? Because they did a few things right. But they also recognized that they could have done a few things differently as well. The scam goes something like this if you're not familiar with it. The con contacts a potential victim over the phone posing as a grandchild requiring urgent cash. The scenario involves the grandchild being in a motor vehicle collision while traveling through another city. The end goal, of course, and fortunately we didn't get that far, involves the victim sending cash through Western Union or a variety of different means. This is how our story went down. Mom was home one afternoon, picked up the phone, and a con man at the other end said in a very panicked voice, "Grandma, is that you?" Thinking that it sounded a bit like one of her grandsons, but not being sure, we'll just call him Johnny. She says, "Johnny, is that you? It doesn't sound like you." "Yes, Grandma, it's Johnny." So let's just stop the story there for a minute, because this is an important point to make. The con man had no idea what her grandchild's name was, but she very innocently and inadvertently revealed the name just because the con kind of sounded a bit like Johnny, but she wasn't sure. And of course, it caught her totally off guard because he was panicked, and she became panicked. That's how slick these cons are. So once the con got a bit of information, that is the grandchild's name, he didn't want Grandma to be talking to Johnny too long because she'd maybe smell a rat. So a constable quickly gets on the phone and cuts Johnny off at mid-sentence, and he said something like, "This is Constable Smith," and rattled on a bit about the situation involving a motor vehicle accident and some negligence involved on Johnny's part. Then he puts a third person on the phone, if that isn't enough to get you really worked up. It was a lawyer. This time the lawyer tells Grandma how she can put up a bond to get Johnny out of the deep trouble that he's in. Now you can imagine this would panic anyone. As a parent, you want to stand up for your kids. So she was very panicked for the grandchild, but she did the right thing by passing on our work phone number where my dad, Ed, Grandpa works, where I also work. But in the meantime, they prodded Mom for more information. Well, who are we calling and what is this all about? So that they had enough information that when the call went through to Grandpa, maybe they can continue the scam with him. Mom was quick enough to immediately call Dad at our family office. Being just down the hall from Dad, I overheard the conversation and he called me in. No sooner did we get the information, he hung up the phone. The scammer call came through to us. I put it on speaker, of course, kind of hiding in the background at first. The con man, claiming to be a lawyer this time, went on to retell the story of how Johnny was in an accident near Edmonton, there was criminal negligence involved, and he didn't want to tell his parents, etc., etc., etc. At that point, I finally intervened, representing myself as a concerned relative, and simply asked one question. What would that question be? We need to speak with Johnny. Put him on the phone. At that point, he was taken back, surprised to hear another family member intervening. So he paused for a moment and then said, no, unfortunately, Johnny is already in custody, but we did speak with his grandmother a few minutes ago, and she was able to identify him. Can you believe it? He asked us a few more questions, and then asked if we were anywhere near a courthouse, which I thought was a strange question. And I said, a courthouse in Calgary? We were downtown at the time, so of course we're near the courthouse. As a matter of fact, I'm 2 minutes away from a courthouse, and I'll meet you there in 5 minutes. I don't think he was expecting that answer, or to have a trusted family member get involved. Well, at that point, the phone went dead, understandably. He clearly didn't want a family advocate involved, and probably realized he didn't want to waste any of his time, as if he didn't waste ours, and terrorize us in the meantime. Dad and Mom were quite shaken by this, and it really took a while for them to kind of come down from that mountain of being scared. But eventually, that same afternoon, we reached Johnny by phone, and of course, all was well. So the 3 things that I tried to instill in our own home, and I'd recommend to anyone for that matter that have worked for us. Number 1, don't answer your phone unless you recognize the number as a friend or a relative. And it's hard to do when you may have come from a generation where you might have had a party line at one time. When your ring came through, you picked it up. Habits are hard to break, but with the technology we have today, just don't answer your phone. If you do pick up the phone, sadly, you have to assume that every solicitation is a scam until you can prove otherwise. That is the world we live in today, unfortunately. The best way to prove it up, get a callback number. Usually a scammer won't give that to you from what I've heard. And try to get as much information from them as you can, interrupting them and getting information and writing it down, and perhaps getting enough information to have your family advocate call back. And yes, have an advocate, a trusted family member, a younger neighbor, or friend. You recall when you were younger, you protected your own kids like a mama or a papa bear? Well, you need to find someone to act as your mama bear or papa bear. Kind of like one of those with a pit bull personality. I would choose Norbert as mine. Very good at it. Anyway, finally, anyone can be taken into a scam very easily, young or old. I mean, just the other day I received an email that seemed legit. It was from a software company that I use and subscribe to. So never beat yourself up if it happens to you, as it happens to the best of us. And always talk to someone you trust. Have that pit bull in your corner before you act on anything. Now, I know there's a few other people that wanted to share more wisdom than I have, so I'm done. We can proceed to the next. Thanks for listening to my story.
Now, the next speaker, very similar to what you just heard from James. James is sitting over here with his dad. Before he goes, if you have questions that you want to ask, go and see James, because they will wait for you when you come in before you go. Okay, our next speaker is Alvin F. He had a similar thing happen, and this was recent. This is fresh, and it's so recent that he'll tell you about it. And there may be a bit of overlap, but you know, these scammers, they are so cunning. Listen to how cunning they really are. Okay, Alvin.
Good morning to all of you. Ron asked me to be as precise as possible, so I wrote a few things down. In preparation for putting my thoughts together, I went on the internet to just see what was said about scammers. And I was absolutely amazed at the amount of material there is about scamming. Just a few points before I get into the story. Last year, year 2021, in the United States, it is estimated that 1 out of every 10 people were scammed, to the total of $29.8 billion. That's a lot of money. But only because there were so many that were scammed, it only averaged to $502 per person. In Canada, in 2021, according to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, there were 46,604 people scammed, losing $231 million. And here's the thing that really shocked me: an average loss of $4,956 per person. The internet talked about 30 different kinds of scams. I'll just mention the top 5. We're all accustomed to the Nigerian scam for many, many years, where you get this letter saying that a rich relative of yours has passed away and they have $50 million that they have to distribute amongst relatives that they can't find. That's still going on. The number one fraud is online fraud. And last year in particular, it almost doubled because of the COVID. Romance is the second most popular fraud. In Canada, 671 people lost $32 million, an average of $48,000 per person. Love is blind, or loneliness, I'm not sure what all the factors are, but those are the facts that were presented. The third most common is extortion. The CRA, that's the most common one, where you get this letter where you owe the CR some money. Even people get involved claiming they're from the bank. Then you have personal information that is stolen. And then, of course, there's the grandkids scam. The fourth one is merchandising. And the fifth one is service scams. People come and want to fix your deck, or they're going to build you a new deck. They want 50% of the money down. You give them the money, they drop off a few 2x4s, and they're gone. Just a week ago, Sunday, February the 6th, in the Calgary Sun, this article appeared. Scammer targets Calgary seniors. Calgary police are asking for the public help to identify a man suspected of defrauding senior citizens of thousands of dollars. And then it goes on to describe what the man looked like. Police said that in the last few weeks, the identified man has taken a total of $50,000 from 6 individuals. Also, Calgary police arrested 2 other individuals last month in a similar fraud scam that targeted elders. That scheme has allegedly targeted seniors by saying that their grandchild was in jail and needed bail money. Have I been scammed? Yes. I humbly confess I do play the stock market. You see the big M on my forehead. You all remember the Briax scam of 1887 when it started. At 1887, or 1987 I should say, you could buy that stock for 27 cents, and it went to a total of $126 a share before the thing was all discovered to be a total scam. I didn't fall for that one, but I did buy shares of some other gold companies, and they ended up about the same way. You know, stock promoters can be very, very convincing. So my grandson's attempt story. This year, on 2 different occasions, I got the call, both on a Monday morning. On the first occasion, I almost fell for it. This past Monday, just a week ago, they tried again with the very same scheme. So I asked myself, am I that gullible that I can fall for this? And then 3 things came to mind. They all deal with emotions, dealing with love, greed, fear, and trust. You know, we have, number one, I think we have unconditional love for our children and grandchildren, and sometimes even more for our grandchildren than our children, so you can fall for it pretty quickly. I grew up in an age of trust. I grew up on a farm. Nothing was locked up. We didn't even have a lock on our front door or the back door of the house. The keys to the car, keys to the tractors, were all in the tractor. We didn't have to go looking for them. There was no lock on the gas pumps. Anybody could have come and helped themselves. That's the environment I grew up in. And then there are circumstances. You know, sometimes we know too much about our grandchildren and their needs. And maybe that becomes part of the whole problem. And as a consequence, we often miss some of the major flags. There's always a flag. So here's how my story went. The phone rings. Hi, Grandpa. How are you doing? I kind of recognized the voice, but it didn't sound like my grandson's voice. And then we had some chit-chat. And then I finally said, Jason, is that you? Your voice is different. Here was the first flag that I missed. I think all of us on our phone, we have this caller ID. And I did happen to look at that caller ID and it said private. Now, to the best of my recollection, I only have one family member that uses the private caller. The rest is usually always a number. I missed it, but the flag didn't go up. Yes, Grandpa, it's me. Jason, it doesn't sound like you. Oh, Grandpa, I have a cold. Flag. The voice didn't sound like someone having a cold. But knowing Jason, he is susceptible to colds, so it kind of made sense. Oh, Jason, so sorry to hear that. Hope you get better soon. And then there's a lot of chit-chat going on. Grandpa comes right to it. Grandpa, I'm in trouble, and I need your help. But please don't tell anybody. They're going to flag right away. Jason, how are you in trouble? I'm in jail, and I need bail money. How did you end up in jail? And why are you calling from a private number? Grandpa, the police confiscated my phone. So Jason, why are you in jail? Grandpa, my car broke down, and my friend Stephen borrowed his brother's car. Sounded reasonable. Jason does drive an old car, and he tries to work whenever possible for skip the dishes, trying to make some extra money while he's going to university. So Jason, how did you end up in jail? Well, we were stopped by the police for speeding. So? Well, Grandpa, the police checked the trunk of the car, and unbeknown to us, there were drugs in the trunk of the car. They tested us for drugs, and we were clean. But the police still put us in jail. Now, there should have been another flag. I don't think it happens that fast. But, Grandpa, my court hearing isn't until Thursday. This is a Monday, and I don't want to sit in jail until Thursday. Once again, when I think about it, he says, my court hearing, and suddenly his friend disappeared. What happened to his friend? So, Jason, how much money do you need? Grandpa, I need $8,000. Silence. Grandpa, I'm clean. I just need the loan until Thursday, and you'll get the money back on Thursday. Right, it goes that fast, doesn't it? Another flag. Now I'm beginning to wake up and get a little suspicious. Jason, I don't have $8,000. I lied. Grandpa, how much do you have? Not that much. By now, my emotions began to throb at my heart because I knew that I could help him out. And I didn't want to tell my grandson that I thought he was a liar and leave him in jail. But I had a moment of clarity and I asked Jason, Jason, refresh my memory. Tell me again exactly what happened. Click. The phone went dead. So this past week, Monday, once again, Monday morning, about 10 o'clock, phone rings. I look at it, private number. Wait a minute. But this time I did take notice of the private. It says private. Same thing. Hello. Hi, Grandpa. How's it going? Oh, it's going good. So good to hear your voice. Then we had this small chit-chat back and forth. And then right on. Grandpa, I'm in trouble. I need your help. I hung up. I carry a device with me, which is used sometimes if you're in trouble. I should have had it with me and pulled it. The battery's going dead. Actually, every woman should have one of these. You pull that thing, and at least it gets someone else's attention. You can buy them separately, or you can buy 5 at a time. They're cheaper by 5 than they are by 1. Anyway, that's my story. I say it's the emotions that set in, and when they take over, sometimes we don't think all that rational.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard from 2 of our classmates that are men. Now you're going to hear from a couple of them that are ladies. Dave and Alita live not far from the church in one of our subdivisions near the church. And they had something happen to them in their home that you can't believe. Alita, would you come and tell us your story? And we're going to be all ears. I'm so grateful that they will do this and that you're going to be informed. And if you see a moose on the road and you run into it, it'll be your fault. Because I'm trying to make you alert that you can avoid it. Alita?
December the 23rd, 21. At 2:30 between 3 o'clock, I got this call. It was that cold, blizzardy Thursday afternoon when I received the call. I'm going to dramatize this a bit, so kind of forgive me for this. Grandma, I was in a terrible accident, and I'm in a jail downtown. I knew I could trust you, and I need money to get out. Can you help me? Did you call your dad? No, because I could only get one call, so I called you. I had a sore throat, so I was going to the store to get something for it. And when I turned onto the parking lot, I hit this car. And the ambulance had to take this pregnant lady to the hospital. And they said if they lose the baby, they could sue me. I said, Ellery, why were you driving so fast? Right then, I gave a name. When I said this, they had a name to use. Do you want to speak to the officer? And I said, yes. He said, I'm Constable Jacob Moore. My badge number is 32055, and he confirmed the accident just as she had told it to me on the phone. He said the couple in the car were posting a gag order, and I have to pay bail of $12,000 if I want my grandchild out of jail today. And I'm in shock, and I'm thinking, $12,000? He asked me if I lived near a bank to get the money, and it had to be cash. I said, cash? He said, do you have a debit card? You could use your debit card to get the cash. And I should have twigged, but I didn't. I asked, where do I take this cash? I'm not going to drive downtown in this kind of weather. Well, when you get the cash, we'll have a security person come and he'll pick up the cash. By now, I'm in a panic, and I'm scared at the same time. I was not to tell anyone about this phone call that I had received, or I could be liable as well. I just got Dave home from the hospital, and I couldn't leave him alone, so I had to phone a neighbor to come and stay with him. And of course, this took a little bit of time. So I went to the bank. The bank wouldn't release any money to me, especially in such a large amount and in cash. They called the manager, and the manager, the very first thing he said to me is, you've been scammed. I said, I know that voice, I'm sure it was real. No, he said, ma'am, we've had another call similar to this week, and it was for the same amount of money. When I came home, he wouldn't release me any money. He said, I cannot release you any money. And I'm in a state now, I'm thinking, what am I going to do? This poor kid, she's in jail, she'll be staying overnight, and it'll be Christmas Eve. What am I going to do? I have to get her out. So when I got home, the phone was ringing. I quickly got off my boots and answered the phone, and they said, did you get the money? And I said, no. I said, they wouldn't release any money to me. He stopped for a minute, and he said, could you go to another bank? Do you live near another bank? Maybe they'll release you some money. And he said, tell them that you've just had some renovations done and that the contractor wants the money in cash. That sounded kind of strange to me. And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, I'm going to phone down there and just find out. So I phoned the number that they gave me, and I said, I'm just wondering, I had a call from you people, and I want to know if this is a legitimate call. And he said, do you know the constable you were speaking to? And I said, yes. And I gave him the constable's name and the number that he had given me. And so I said to him, why was an RCMP on city property charging my daughter with this accident or giving her a ticket for this accident? And he said, you know, the constable was just driving by when he saw the accident happen, and that's why I ticketed her. I thought to myself, he must have been a little leery when I asked these questions. And maybe he's catching on that I'm catching on, because after that there wasn't another call. I did go to the second bank and I told them about the renovations I had done, and I needed this money in cash. And the teller immediately called the manager over, and she took me into her office. And she said, Mrs. Evans, you are being scammed. I said, I need that $12,000 or my granddaughter's going to be in jail overnight. And she said, can you give me your family's name so that I could call them just to see if your granddaughter is home or in jail? And I said, oh no, they told me I can't give out any information or I would be sued as well. And she said, well, I'm going to call the police station downtown, which she did. And I talked to the officer downtown, and the first thing the officer downtown at the police station asked the banker was, don't release any money. Have you released any money? And she said, no. And then she said, let me talk to the lady. So she talked to me and assured me that, it was a scam. And I said, oh, I'm sure it's not. Because this is how convinced I was. The voice was so much like my granddaughter. This is exactly the kind of thing that she would do. And so I was sure this was her. Anyway, she said, give me somebody in your family's name. And I said, no, I can't do that. But she assured me, so I gave her our son's number. She called Jerry, and Jerry said, no, she's at home here. And in the background, Grandma, I'm okay, don't worry about me. So while I was doing this, Dave was concerned that I was gone so long, and he phoned Jerry. Now, had I been thinking, I probably would have called somebody, my son, for sure, and found out if she was home, but I was in such a tizzy at this moment that I didn't even think of that. So Dave had called Jerry and told him what was happening. So when the police came to the bank then, and first of all, going back to the policeman downtown, she said, I want to assure you, Miss Evans, that there is no RCMP office downtown. There's no jail there, so she's not in jail. And there's no jail in the office downtown here in the police station. So anyway, the police did come to the bank, and I gave them all the information, the phone numbers and everything that they had left with me. So, like I said, normally I wouldn't have been caught this way, but I was under a lot of stress that week with Dave just coming out of the hospital, and I let my guard down. I'd had a call previously a year ago, and it was similar to Al's. It was a grandson, and he was in Montreal. And the phone rang, and I said, hello. Hi, Grandma, do you know who this is? And I thought for a minute. I said, is that you, Dave? Again, I gave out a name. He says, yeah, I'm here for a wedding. He said, I'm an usher at my best friend's wedding, and we partied last night, and I drove home back to the hotel. I was not drunk, but I had too much to drink, and I got charged, and I'm in jail now. They want $1,000 to get me out. Could you help me? And as soon as he said that, I said, Dave, I know that's not my Dave. My Dave wouldn't do that. So as soon as I said my Dave wouldn't do that, the phone and call ended anyway. But I was so scared just to give out the information, even to the banker, to the police, because he said, I could be sued or they'd get after me. He also told me that previous to that, if she appeared in court for this bail, this gag order, that this $12,000 I would get back. Well, of course, we know that's not true. But I was really thankful to the bank manager, Brentwood, and to the police officer for assuring me that this was a scam. And let me tell you, I thank God many, many times that week and still for watching over me that day, because I could have been out $12,000. That's how gullible I was that day. And even to make sure that I was okay and I was upset and everything, my kids, Jerry and Tina, came over that night. We had supper and they stayed overnight with me just to be sure that I'd be okay. I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't lose money that day.
Do you see how close it is? Well, I'm going to wrap it up by letting you listen to a banker. Esther is here. She works for one of the large banks in our city, and this is the very thing she deals with every day. And she can't give you all the inside information from the bank because they're like a lawyer. It's pretty. But Esther's going to tell you some information that's going to help you avoid a scam. So Esther, come. Meet our people. This is Renata Schuster's daughter. So this will be a nice surprise to you, because when you see Esther, you'll probably look at her mom. Here you go.
Good morning. So thank you for having told your story, because the truth is most people don't tell their story. Sorry. Okay, I'll speak up. Is that better? Okay. Very close to the mic. Okay, thank you. Most people don't tell their story. Actually, very few people will tell if they've been scammed, because it's embarrassing. And it does play has an emotional impact on you. You know, if you've ever been robbed, I've had my house broken into twice in 1 year. You know that this was years ago, but you know that you feel very violated, and it's very difficult for you. So it's not something you really like to share. But it is important that you're speaking up. If you are experiencing any kind of fraud, it's really important that you report it. You report it to your bank. You report it. The Canadian government does have a place that you can report it, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. It's really important to speak up. This is the way that they catch these people too. The more that people talk and tell their story, the more that they are able to investigate, find the clues that lead them to the people that are doing this. And I will just tell you, I've written up a few things, but thank you for sharing all the stats, because I had reviewed that as well. Mr. Admirable, thank you for that. I will share that years ago, I've been in banking for a long, long time. I'm not here as a representative of a bank, but I am just sharing as a person that sort of gets to see all of this regularly. I've worked for the bank for a very long time, and so I'm going to say over 15 years ago, closer to 20 years ago, if a fraud came across, when I was at the bank, and a fraud came across maybe once a month. I remember the first time a guy came into the bank and he had a forged check. And we caught him and we asked him to have a seat. And he did. And while he was sitting, we called the police. And I remember my heart was pounding because this guy was sitting there, right? And feeling, how can someone do such a thing? Today, when I'm at work, I hear about it multiple times a day, not once a month, regularly. So it is really important. It's worse than the pandemic. You need to know that you need to be careful. One, ladies, I'm going to give you a tip. Don't keep all of your ID in one place. So don't keep it all in your purse and you take your purse with you. Don't do that. That can be devastating when someone gets a hold of your purse, they've got everything. Don't do that. Or gentlemen, don't leave your wallet in the car. Cars get broken into. They got your wallet, they've got your ID. Personal identity theft is huge right now. People look and they gather little bits of information on you. And then when they have enough information, they use that to take over your identity. So they might go to a bank, open an account, and they've got your ID. Oh yes, it has your picture on your ID. Well, guess what? They're really good at making new ID with that. And it looks real. Even to those of us that work at the bank, it looks very real. We have to be super cautious. You go to a new bank, they open up an account, they then get credit cards. You might not know about it because you're not notified every time credit gets taken out on you, right? Our credit bureaus, Equifax and TransUnion, they don't report to you, but it is a good idea to go and check with them maybe once a year. Find out, what does your credit bureau say about you? Go get it pulled. that you have a right to that information. That will tell you if everything is okay. And then sometimes you'll find out by accident. Maybe a bank statement doesn't come in the mail, or maybe a credit card statement didn't come. These are all little signs that you need to pay attention to and double check. If something happens like that, call your bank. Another thing, if the bank calls you and says, your account has been compromised, you know, we need you to do this or that. Even if they're saying they're from the bank, don't say anything. Listen, hang up, look at the number on your card, call the trusted number that you have at your bank. I cannot tell you how many times a day I speak to people who say, I got a call from you and I was told that my card was compromised. Very often, it wasn't us that called. Very often. Also, there's some general information that happens at the banks, like your debit card. It's general for the beginning of your debit card to be associated with a bank. So CIBC will have one, TD has one, Bank of Montreal will have one, and they don't know anything. They'll tell you they have those first 6 numbers and they'll tell them to you and you think, yeah, that's that. That is mine. No, it's not. It's general for all of the banks. Don't fall for that. They don't know anything. They're phishing. So when we talk about phishing, let's talk about that for a minute. Phishing is what we call a type of fraud. It is when someone's trying to find out information about you, so they can find out either by they will send you an email, or you'll get a phone call, that's called phishing, or you'll get a text message, that's called smishing. And if that happens, careful. One, when you're answering the phone, say hello. Listen, don't respond. Don't say anything, let them talk. Know who it is you're talking to. If you don't know, hang up. Don't give them your voice. Very important, don't give them your voice. Because you know your voice is kind of like a fingerprint, right? We don't want to be giving that away. Hang up the phone. If you're uncertain and the information that you've heard makes you, like you're anxious, like, oh, what if it is true? Call the number that you are trusted. In all cases you heard about an urgency. You have to do this right now, and don't tell anyone. Evil grows in the dark. We need to put light on it. Call the people that you know and trust. Don't go with who you're hearing on the other end. Credit card theft is another one. There have been many that you've heard about, the dating scams, email scams. Let's talk about emails for a minute. Sorry. When you get an email, be careful what emails you open. Because attached to emails can be what they call malware, and it can get into your computer. They have access to your contacts, lots of things. These are very real things. So unless you know where it's coming from, don't open it up. Even if it looks like it's coming from your bank, be careful. Look at the email very carefully. Is it really coming from your bank? They add 1 or 2 numbers or letters to it. Looks like it's coming from there, but it's not. So again, how do you confirm something? Pick up the phone, call the trusted number that you have. Everything, when we're doing something as a bank, when they do something or set something up, they'll make a note on file that they've contacted you. So when you call in, they'll know, oh yeah, you were contacted, here it is why. If it truly is that your information was compromised, there will be a note on file. They'll take care of it, the bank takes care of it, right? Another thing you had mentioned, going into your bank and the bank manager comes in and says, are you in money, they are trying to protect you. People at the bank are always mandated to look out for you. Not everything gets caught, obviously, but we're always required to ask questions. Sometimes people take offense to that we are asking questions, like, casually they'll ask, oh, you're sending this money off to, because we're trying to protect you, because I personally have known people that have sent money off to places where they thought was being or supporting someone, even in missions, and it wasn't true. They were scammed many times. So when you start to see a habit, then the bank gets, okay, why are we sending this large amount of money to, and how well do you know this? Super important. You must know who you're sending your money to. Fraud is just someone misrepresenting themselves, pretending to be someone else for their own personal gain, financially. That's what fraud is. And it is true that through COVID, fraud has increased 100-fold. As I said to you, it's a big concern. Another thing that happens is that people get email checks. We've all heard about email money transfer and mobile deposits now. Now, mobile deposit is where you can take a picture of your check and deposit it, but it must be a real check. So what's happening now is that people are doing things like go to sell something on Kijiji. Somebody says, oh yeah, I want to buy that. I'll send you a check. So they send a picture of a check off to this person. A lot of people fall for this. So the people think, oh, you can just deposit that picture of the check. You have to have a real check. You can't just take a picture of the check and deposit that. Okay, that's a sure sign. That's a scam. Okay, so you want to be careful of that. Email checks to you can't be deposited. And there's a confusion, I think, on what is, because digital is so new for everyone that sometimes people are not aware of what they can and can't do. Text alerts, that's another thing, and that is a huge thing. Text alerts saying your account has been compromised. If this was you, click yes. If this was not you, log in and reactivate or book an appointment at your branch so that it follows you down a link. Never click on links. Okay? And so that's a scam. Bank may send you a text to say, this is what's happened. Yes or no, that may happen that you get that. If you're not sure, don't answer. Pick up the phone, call your bank on the trusted number that you know. They will be able to tell you if that was legitimate or not. That's the way to err on it. I thank people daily. Thank you for watching over your accounts, because all of this does have an impact on all of us, right? We pay a big bill as society, as Canadian society. It costs everyone when this fraud continues. It costs money, and we all pay for it. We pay for it in fees, interest rates on your credit cards, things like that, we all end up paying for. If some of this gives you the shivers, that's actually a good thing. Because we can't fathom how someone else could do such horrible things. We don't think that way. We have a conscience. They don't. That's the difference. Important things to remember to protect yourself. Watch over your accounts. So check them regularly. If you see something's wrong or something doesn't seem right, again, the phone, call your bank, the number that you know. Never give personal information. So don't give out your name, phone number, date of birth. Another thing being very important, to protect your personal information by not using your name, date of birth, address, things like that when you're doing PINs, passwords. Don't be doing that. These should be random. They should be a little more complex. This is your protection. You don't want to leave the door open for trouble. Be careful of websites that you go on. There are many websites that look legitimate, and as I said, they change a little bit and they're not real. Online purchases, very careful. If you do email money, transfer money, make sure you're putting in, you know who you're sending your money to. You know the email address is exact and accurate and correct. And double check that. Because if the email goes out and oops, I sent it to the wrong email and it legitimately belongs to someone else, that's it. We can't reclaim it. You're counting on the other person to have, out of the goodness of their heart, to send it back to you. So that's something you want to be careful of as well. Be careful of emails that come. You can recognize false emails often by there are spelling mistakes, things like that. And there are usually links that come on the emails that take you so that they end up having access to your information. Listen to the small, still voice that tells you something is not right. And that I learned this week more than anything. Listen to that small, still voice. Turn the volume on that small, still voice up by spending time with the one who belongs to that voice. Spend time in God's Word daily and praying often through the day. That's how we hear His voice. And we often feel something isn't right. Listen to that voice. James 1:5 says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. And I did write down that verse, Pastor Ron. Matthew 10:16, behold, I am the one sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be shrewd as snakes and innocent or harmless as doves. And then I will leave you with one other verse, Philippians 4:8. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. That's when we keep our mind on those things. Yes, we live in a broken world. We do. And there is sin in our world. And this is just one aspect of that. But we are the light of the world. God wants to show His light through us. So, go out and be that light to your neighbors. Thank you.
Well, for all of our speakers, thank you for your kindness and your honesty. Well, the clock on the wall has sped by and it's time. I was going to have you sing one of the great choruses that we sing as children. Jesus loves me, this I know. We're going to do that next week. When we start class, Frida will have it ready and we'll sing it then. Say hi to these people that did that wonderful presentation and say hi to JFK who gave you that lovely tea. So away you go. You're dismissed.